Hello and welcome to yet another video, and in this video it is something very different than usual because we'll be taking a look at this camera right here. It's the Sony F717. Now what's special about this camera compared to pretty much all of other cameras I talked about is, well, the form factor pretty much. This kind of got me really amazed and really interested in this camera, and I've been, wondering actually how this camera would perform ever since I first saw this camera way back about a decade ago. And talking of which, this camera has been out for pretty much 2 decades now. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into the video. So the Sony F717, now this camera has been out for quite a while now, I know, as mentioned earlier, just slightly above 2 decades, and to be honest, after using this camera, it actually kind of freshened up my mind a little bit. And unlike most of my other cameras where I actually spent years using those cameras because I have them for years, this camera, it's just more of like, when I first saw it a decade ago, I kind of like went, meh, it wasn't really interesting, but just a couple of months ago, I was like, that camera, what was it? Sony. It really had this really interesting form factor and also this weird function that you can twist the body. So it just kind of got me obsessed about this camera. So 2 months ago, or like, yeah, a couple of months ago, I just started researching about Sony older compact cameras / bridge cameras, and this family of cameras showed up, and I just picked anyone that was available on my used market at the time, which was the 717, the 707, the 505 line, and so on and so forth. And of course, the models that came after that weren't on the secondhand market, so it was only this one, and I got it for 35 euros. So unlike most of my other cameras, I really only had the past couple of months to test this camera, but I will still give it my full opinion and of course divide it into 3 different sections as usual. The first one being the operational side, the ergonomics, how the build quality is like, how it's like to use it, and then going to the image quality for both photography and video, though just slightly touching on the video, and then leading into the conclusion why I still recommend this camera and why I might not recommend this camera. So for the operational side of things / the ergonomics, well, this camera, just from this feature alone of being able to tilt the camera body makes it already very different than most of the cameras out there in the market. It does remind me of the camcorder, where you can also twist the side body that you usually put in tape or this mini discs, things like that, and you can just adjust the handle on the side just to fit your orientation or how you want the camera to orientate, that kind of thing. And yeah, this action here just feels very similar to that, though I find that this is actually more ergonomical and also somehow more practical as well, because like I can just keep the lens in the same level and or even on the waist level, and then just twist the camera body up or just like this, depending on like how it feels most natural to my eyes and also my hands or my wrist at the time, depending on which angle I go for. The only downside is, of course, it's not able to flip sideways like the more modern screens can, but of course, just having this feature is already really, really interesting because you still have your controls at your fingertips. And talking about controls, the controls on these cameras are actually really well thought out, apart from the mode tile, but I'll get into that later. So being a very stripped down camera and also a camera that, really offers all the basic essentials features without any other kind of useless gimmicks, because at that time not a lot of useless gimmicks were really introduced to these cameras. But yeah, with that said, it actually allowed all of the essential function buttons to be at your fingertips as well, and you rarely actually have to go into the menu. So for example, if you just want to adjust your exposure compensation, it's also just with a dial, and you can actually just switch your flash mode on or go to your white balance settings or even zoom, whether using this ring here viewfinder, or just by using these buttons here. Or you can actually switch between the zoom ring to a manual focus ring. Yes, this camera actually offers manual focus, but because of the smaller sensor size, I just keep it to autofocus at most times, because it really didn't really make any sense or any difference if I were to switch to manual or auto focusing system. So yeah, moving on to the next point, which is the screen. The screen itself here, of course, I cannot use the more modern day standards of the screens applied to this camera, or even like the screens from the cameras from a decade ago, because screens also came a long way, and we were just looking at this camera based on the technology that was available back then. I would say that the screen is actually quite usable. If it's in a super backlit situation, or if it's in a super sunny day situation, then that's when the screen can get a little bit too reflective, and you might actually have to use the viewfinder right here. But talking about the viewfinder, the color accuracy is okay. It's not the best in the world, but that is to be expected. But the only downside from using both the screen here and the actual viewfinder here is, well, it's an old technology. So if you're taking pictures in low light, the screen lag, the latency is very laggy, and it's just very blurry as well. So don't move a lot in low light, otherwise it can feel a little bit scary if you're just looking through the viewfinder. But if you're just looking through the big screen here, it will just feel like one of those older camcorders trying to film in low light, and you see all this shutter lags and everything. So you also get that on this screen. Whew. Yeah, that's about it. And another point I actually quite like and also find quite interesting is the tripod plate down here. I really like how they actually keep the tripod plate down here. Of course, it's logical to place it down here, but you know, a lot of cameras would also actually have it placed on the body itself, but having it placed down here at the lens barrel actually gives it a very nice feeling of a flat flat surface. So if you're just using, let's say, one of those thick fens with kind of like a balanced surface, you still can mount this on the fence or on the wall or what have you, so you don't always need the tripod in those circumstances or in those situations where you just need to take a little bit of long exposure but you just don't have a tripod with you, just want to just put it on some sort of, you know, fence surface or wall surface, things like that. So it's actually quite nice. But also obviously when you're taking pictures with the tripod, then you don't need to actually tilt the lens, you just tilt the body, and that just works like one of those articulating screens on normal camera bodies. And now to the next feature, which I haven't really used, but if you see these two holes up here, these two holes actually fire out infrared lights. You can't really see it in most cases, but you can actually activate that. And during daylight, it will be kind of impossible to activate it, simply because it made it kind of like a safety feature that you don't photograph weird things with infrared technology. So there's that, but you can of course just experiment by using one of those UV filters that's really dark. I forgot the name of it, but it's like one of those full spectrum filters that you can just attach to the front filter thread here, and then you can actually just use the infrared mode. And if you look over here, it's actually a third hole, and that's actually firing this kind of red light that allows the camera, or kind of guide the camera where to focus in low light situations. So this camera can actually focus in low light situations as well. Kind of like if you're using one of those flashlight guns and it just fires out these kind of red lights at random places or just in the center of the scene, so that the camera can actually focus on those red lights and just determine which distance the subject is away from the camera. So it's kind of similar technology to that, so that's actually pretty good. And talking about the focusing options, the focusing system on this camera is, well, because it's not really a sports camera, you can get away with it. In most cases, it's not slow. Well, it's not too slow. It's not quick either. It's just, it's okay. You kind of expect it to just hunt a little bit, going out of focus and then into focus, but nothing sluggish. Like if I'm just focusing in daylight versus if I'm just focusing in semi-low light, it's roughly the same time. It's just going to be out of focus and then back into focus again. And yeah, so that's actually quite nice, especially from a technology that's over 2 decades ago. So yeah, I'm actually quite impressed with the autofocusing system. Again, the speed is not too fast, but it actually gets things really accurately in focus. But that's also thanks to the much smaller sensor in this camera versus in a much more modern day cameras, especially the compact cameras with bigger sensors. There's so many compact cameras with much bigger sensor than this camera nowadays out there in the market. But of course, it still gets its job done, so that's pretty good. Now moving on to the side, which is where you'll find your media storage and also battery. I'm actually really amazed by the battery itself. This is the original NP-FM50 battery, and I've been using this battery for weeks now, and I only managed to get it down by 25%. And that's from, you know, carrying out into the cold, carrying out into the heat as well, and also just photographing around here and there and taking video clips here and there as well. And yeah, in the past 2 weeks, I really only managed to get the battery down by 25%. So I still have around 75% more to go. Yeah, it's actually quite robust. Of course, I heard some cases, you know, from some people that actually got into using this camera, the battery actually didn't really hold that much charge to begin with. But personally for me, I have 2 batteries, and this one is still holding the charge quite well. And I got this battery together with this camera and the other battery anyway for 35 euros. So yeah, there is that. This camera actually accepts the power directly through this part over here. So if you want to film something for a long period of time, or if you want to photograph something for a long period of time, you can just plug in your power onto this part. Or if for some reason all of your batteries are charging and you still need to use this camera, then of course you have the power right here set on a tripod, and you can actually just use it just like that. Oh, and I forgot to mention one more thing. The memory card slot, it actually takes the older memory card, the Sony memory card. This is actually an adapter because I have a smaller card right here. It's a 2 GB card. Assuming my camera will focus. It won't. Okay. Okay, never mind. But yeah, it's actually quite interesting. A lot of card readers still takes the MS memory stick card just to read. So if you buy one of those older CF card readers or those older SD card readers, there's a high chance that it will also accept these MS cards on one of the ports. So yeah, that's actually pretty neat. On to the next point, which is over here below the lens. You'll find the USB 2.0 port, which at the time was actually quite revolutionary because it wasn't that long ago at the time when USB 1.0 was the standard. So, you know, large 5 megapixel files running through this port. So yeah. There's that. Okay, now onto the more kind of negative side, which I actually don't have a lot of, to be honest with you. There's one main negative side for me is, for example, when I see menu, I always think of like the menu settings on more modern cameras where you find the actual menu page. But the menu on this camera, the menu button, you just find like quick menu settings on the screen. Whereas if you just want to actually go into a proper menu, you have to rotate your mode dial to your setup menu, which is underneath your movie mode. That bothered the heck out of me because it took me several days to find that out. Because I wasn't expecting it to be on the mode dial. I just thought that, okay, this camera really offered really little menu settings, because I thought the quick menu was the whole menu, which I was like, okay, how do people set date and time on here? And when I first got this camera, it was factory reset, so it was making all these shutter noise, all these focusing noise, all these beeps every time you navigate through the menu, which was really annoying. But yeah, just a few days later, I was like, okay, I just decided to just look on the mode dial, and there was setup. Huh, I never went in there before. And I originally thought setup was probably one of those like scene modes or something, but no, it's the full menu page. So you can set your usual date and time, your usual beep level, turn it off, please, because it's annoying. And all the other menu settings that you would actually expect out of a proper menu page. So yeah, I totally wasn't expecting that. But yeah, otherwise this camera is actually built quite plasticky, but you don't feel like you're gonna break it. It's just a very nice and interesting camera to work with. This camera has a lot of the essential buttons at your fingertips. It actually feels kind of comfortable, even though it's kind of sharp-ish with very few edges here and there, but it actually feels very comfortable in your hands. Of course, the grip is very small. Not all of my fingers actually fit onto the grip, but it is still a very nice and compact feeling. It's not a compact camera, but it's a very compact feeling kind of camera to just carry around. At least that's how I feel about it. Oh, and for those who are wearing glasses, you have the diopter right here. I'm glad that they actually put the diopter up here, because on many older compact cameras it's usually on the side, and I usually find myself knocking on those diopters really often, but on this camera it's up here, so it's hard to knock and change the eyesight distance or level or settings in the viewfinder. So yeah, there's that. Oh, and the flash here is actually pretty good. It's quite powerful for such an old camera, but I haven't really used it on portraits, so I cannot confirm to you guys how good or bad this flash deals with the red eye situation. But yeah, otherwise that's it. If you're comparing this camera to the previous camera, well, the 707, this is the 717. This is a few grams lighter, and it has the selectable autofocusing points, whereas on the previous model you cannot select it. So yeah, those are the main changes. Of course there are more, but those are just the main changes. So yeah, now onto the image quality. For the image quality on this camera, well, I'm not going to grade it the way, or I'm not going to put it in the same standards as, let's say, the cameras from even a decade ago. But if you're looking for something that's really nostalgic, digital vibe, this camera is really good at delivering that. It's not too sharp. What I mean by that, it's not like, it didn't apply a lot of digital sharpening, which is good. It's actually kind of more natural with very slight digital sharpening onto the images, so that's okay. The color is very neutral, so that's quite nice. The skin tone is more on the pale side of things. Yeah, so I would be careful about that if you're photographing certain skin tones, because you can make people look a little bit sick. But for general skin tone, I think it's fine. Where it's really weak at is the moire and aliasing. You will have a lot of those. Any pictures with a lot of patterns in there, especially bricks patterns or repetitive patterns, moire and aliasing will bound to actually get in there, and it's actually quite heavy as well, so please keep that in mind. Otherwise, yeah, the dynamic range is kind of okay for the camera that came out of during that time. I wouldn't go higher than ISO 200, although in most cases I just worked with ISO 500 because I was scared of using slower shutter speed when I'm out shooting like street photography, things like that. Or sometimes I would be kind of afraid of using or trusting the image stabilization in this camera. It does work well if you're considering like the time period when this camera was announced, but for modern day standards it's really far behind, of course, but at least it's there, so that's actually quite nice. So yeah, the ISO does go up to ISO 800, but again, I wouldn't use it higher than ISO 200 if you still want somewhat decently clean images out of this camera. So yeah, there's that. The color science, as mentioned earlier, is quite neutral, quite nice, usable, and if you want to, you know, get that nostalgic digital vibe, you can. And same thing for video, actually. If you want those nostalgic digital vibe, you can. The zoom on here is actually not fast, but actually quite natural as well, and it doesn't stop like that. It kind of slows down and then stop, but just at the very last second, of course, so it makes it less robotic, so that's actually quite nice. And because the zoom doesn't zoom quite rapidly, it makes it a very natural zoom kind of effect. So yeah, that's actually quite nice. But the video, of course, it's not sharp at all. Even if you put this video in 1080p timeline, which this video is far smaller than that, it's just not sharp. When you're looking at like playing back on this smaller screen though, it looks kind of sharp, but when you put it on like a bigger screen, like on the laptop behind me or on the bigger monitor behind me, that's when you really see the whole blob of pixels, because it's really a very small video file, well, resolution. So yeah, but you know, problems like moire and aliasing that was previously a problem in the photography mode is actually more emphasized, more pronounced in video mode. So just be careful of that. And of course, the onboard amp isn't that good either. So if you want to record audio, I wouldn't really trust it a lot, unless if you're really into one of those, you know, kind of older camcorder video audio vibe, then the audio does give it that kind of vibe as well. So yeah. Whew. But yeah, otherwise I don't really have anything else to add. It really comes down to your personal taste. As a camera, it actually delivers what it actually promised to deliver at the time. It's actually quite nice in terms of the image quality, and I guess now I can just kind of lead into the conclusion, because it really depends on if you really want quality in older digital cameras. Well, this camera is not really for you, because the resolution, the image size for both photography and video is just not there. You can work with it, but it's just more for something like you just want that old digital vibe of images, and that's precisely where, you know, this camera is going to be recommended to those people. And I would actually highly recommend it to those people who just want to try the form factor of the camera, the older digital vibe or more nostalgic digital look kind of images. This camera definitely delivers that. On top of that, it does have some basic older digital filters effect, well, image effect on for this particular model as well, so that's actually quite nice. But yeah, otherwise, apart from the image quality sections aside, I still recommend this camera just, you know, to experiment out, because it is a very interesting form factor camera that you can actually get for a very, very low price nowadays. I heard from some people getting it for, let's say, 5 euros or 8 euros. Of course, in my situation at the time, I was only able to get it 35 euros, and that was already a discount from 50 euros. So I definitely got it on a much higher end of things, but I got this with 2 other batteries with extra charger as well, that, you know, on top of the actual charger that came with this camera, it also came with the actual power connection, and then also a camera bag and some filters. And the previous owner even like printed the PDF manual and put it in like a binded kind of folder. So that was a lot of effort. So I guess 35 euros made sense to a certain extent. Yeah, I highly recommend using this camera for just experimental purposes, and also just to study and have fun with this kind of older technology and also older form factor designs. So yeah, it's quite nice. It has a lot of features that you would actually expect from a high-end compact or high-end bridge camera at the time, because it was launched in a price of almost $1,000 actually. So yeah. But oh yeah, by the way, with the filter, you can actually buy a wider filter adapter as well, which gives you the focal length of 26 millimeters. This has a native focal length of around 38 millimeters, give or take, I believe. I forgot the exact number, but it is still a very versatile lens for how I shoot with this camera. So yeah, there's that. I hope this video is somewhat useful and you can gain something out of this video. If you need a free photography guidebook, it's absolutely for free on my website, and it's absolutely for beginners. Just click the link down in the description section below. It'll take you to my page and you can just click and download. I will not bombard you with any newsletter nonsense. If you have any recommendations, any suggestions, any stories to share, feel free to also comment down in the comment section down below as well. Otherwise, I thank you all very much for watching. Stay safe, have fun shooting. Till next time, bye for now.